Okay, I thought I would record this just because typing it out is going to be a pain, and it's probably a little easier to show what's going on. There's a Reddit thread going on. Somebody did some really cool stuff showing some sort of crafting gathering systems of being able to have trees that regrow, something similar to like a Valheim or something like that, using the foliage system in Unreal. Now, I I don't have a lot of art skills. I'm using a bunch of assets that I pulled off or on the marketplace, things like that. But and this is not optimized in any way, shape, or form. But I think this is kind of cool to show how this is done. And I'm really hoping that the original poster on that thread will show what he or she what they did, because I think there's some really cool possibilities here. It's actually pretty easy once you kind of figure out how to get to the objects that you want. So when you use the Foliage Painter over here on the left, whatever I've got checked is what I'm going to paint with in paint mode. So I'm in paint. Oh, that's a huge brush. That's fine. So if I come over here and I paint, that's going to throw down a ton of trees. And my settings, oh my god, that killed my frame rate. My settings are horrible. The density of that is 100, so that's crazy. I'll set that to something a little less crazy. 1. So that threw down a nice little crops of trees there. Crops, whatever that word is. Which is pretty cool, right? Now, what if you want to make those interactable? They're just static meshes, and in fact, they're static mesh instances, so they're more performant. I don't fully understand how all that works or what that specifically means at the end of the day, other than it's more performance. I think it's less draw calls, things like that. So if you want to get to those trees and you want to replace them, how would you do that? After a lot of back and forth and some very helpful people on Reddit, I've finally figured that out. So I have a gathering node here that I've built that is, right now it's this tree. This is actually something that I've got in some test levels. It can be a whole bunch of different things. I can make it a tree. I can make it a, let me see if I can show real quick. Where the heck is it? It's a different gather type here. So if this is set to mining, it becomes a little mining node. I've got herbalism nodes and skinning nodes that I can. This is just kind of playing around. A lot of work to make this actually work the way I want it to. But it's trees by default, and these trees are in this level here as sort of an example. So to make those all choppable in the current state. Well, actually, no, I'm running this, so I have to turn that off to show that. But let's see if this works. Yeah. So if I go back over, I don't know how this is going to work with the recording, so I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. That'll be interesting. But they have no collision. I can run through them. So if I want to, in fact, I'm going to play in this frame just so I make sure that it's actually something you can see. Select a viewport. There we go. So if I run over here, this is a tree that was placed with in the same way. This is just sort of a different layer of these types of trees. So you can run through all of those sort of coniferous trees. So if I want to get to those and replace them, what I've done, and there's probably a ton of different ways you can do this, but I actually created a blueprint. It's just an actor blueprint, and I place it in the level and have it just run on begin play. I've got a delay here just because I wanted to see it actually work and see what it was doing as I was kind of going through and debugging that. That can be removed if you want. So really all I'm doing is I'm getting an actor of class instanced foliage type, or foliage actor. As I understand it, there's only one of those in your level by the default way that it works. And what it's doing is it's collecting all the different foliage types that you've placed as separate, separate foliage instant static mesh component actors. So in mine, you can see here, I've got 4 different things that I've placed. Actually, there's this one, I don't know if that counts in this actually, because there's none placed. It's 0. And all my grass does not count because that's being generated by the material itself. Landscape material tutorials to explain how that works. Again, I kind of followed some instructions, so I'm not fully aware of how all that stuff works. But for this instance, I've got this tree, and this grass, which is out here. So what I wanted to find was this tree, which is this SM tree Pine Large 02. So I needed to get all of the actors, the components that are this foliage instance static mesh component. This is why I didn't want to type this out, because saying that 15,000 times takes forever. So what I did is I found each of those. I'm doing a for each loop with a break so that I can compare the static mesh of this this particular object, which mesh is it using, get the display name of that, and compare it to the one that I'm looking to. If that's true, then I'm setting a variable of that same foliage actor type, and I'm breaking, and so we're done with this loop. So once it finds it, it jumps out and it goes on to this next section. So this is where I'll give credit to the Reddit people, somebody, I love cakes and pies or something like that. Sorry if I got your name wrong. But this is the place where what's happening here is, and again, I don't fully understand how this works. It's a little different than a lot of other stuff in a blueprint, but this foliage actor has instances of whatever that static mesh is. And instead of coming out with an array of all of the different ones, it's just what you have to do is get this instance count. So that'll tell you the number of instances in there, and then set this is a new variable. It's just an integer array, but we're resizing that array to be the size of whatever it is that we just found. So in this case, there are, I think it's 201 of those large pine trees. So what it's doing is it's setting the size of this array to be the same number of trees that we found. So then I'm getting the last index of that, which would be starting at 0, it'd be 0 to 200. So I'm looping through from 0 to 200, and I'm finding, using the same, again, this selected foliage actor, I'm looping through each of those, getting the one from here at the index of whatever we're on the loop, and finding the transform of that object. So wherever it's at in the world, I think you definitely want to click world space. I didn't try it without, but I assume that's not going to work. But then I'm spawning an actor of my gather node, which I showed a little bit ago, and then setting the settings on that the way I want it to. So in this case, it's going to be the wood cutting, which means it's going to come up as trees, and I've got the trees set to the appropriate type, rotting wood. Ignore my stuff, but basically, I mean, you could spawn anything here. You could spawn a cube just to see that it's working, and then after that's done, then I go back through that same. Or I use that same variable for the number of instances, and I'm removing those instances from that foliage actor so that those trees go away and they're replaced by the gather node ones that are interactable. So now that I have this hook back up, you can see when I go in here, if it plays. Oh, that's not going to work. You're not going to be able to see it. Let me do it in here. So now when I go over to those trees, instead of being able to run through them, that's the 5-second timer. So now it just replaced them and it set all my UI to do that. But now I can't run through it, and I can actually interact with it and do the choppy chops. I can work on my logs. So that's pretty much all there is to it. I would assume if you wanted to do this with lots of different looking trees, like obviously you don't want a forest full of the exact same tree, so that's something that I can change on this gather node here, is I can use, when I paint in my level, I can use a bunch of different versions of the trees, and then I can have it so that when I replace those trees, it replaces it with a version of that that matches, so that whatever I'm painting in the world, because you'll notice if I run this in simulation, you don't really notice the difference. It'll happen here in a second. There, it replaced all those trees, but they look the same. I mean, that you wouldn't know the difference. So it works really well. It's pretty slick. I've seen another tutorial of this from it was old. It was like 4. Unreal Engine 4.7 or something like that, where he did a similar the guy did a similar thing, but used a line trace to look at a tree and spawn in a physicalized version, and then he could push it over and knock it down. So there's all kinds of cool stuff you could do here. One thing I do need to play around with in my gather node, these are just static meshes. I'm not doing an instanced static mesh, so I would need to change that if I want it to be performant. But obviously my whole world needs a lot of performance stuff, and that's the art side of things is not my bag, so there's a lot to learn there. But I thought this was pretty cool. Made for a pretty nice way of doing this, and you could probably use the painting tool to put down all sorts of different nodes. Even if you did them on the individual placement, you'd be able to have them all as instance nodes, and then go back and replace them in a way like this, and just do this as you're loading your level, put it behind a black screen or a loading screen, and people would never know the difference. So a lot more to play around with and make this work well. And obviously the gather node needs a lot of loving to really work out all the kinks and give it the different features. But being able to get to those static meshes was super useful. One other thing that came from the Reddit thread is that I thought was kind of interesting, and I did run into a little bit. The reason I'm using this remove instances node, it's just going to remove all of them. If you wanted to go in and find certain ones, I don't know how. I mean, I don't know if you can put tags on a foliage object or whatnot, but if you wanted to do something like that, you could do another for loop and use this instance variable to find those. But I did find that it didn't get rid of all of them, because as you loop through what's there and you remove an instance, it changes the number of instances in here. So if you get rid of, say there's 10 in there, and you get, the first thing it does is it gets rid of the one at 0. There's now, instead of 0 from 9, there's 0 from 8, but then it moves on to 1. So it's resizing what's in there. So it's much more difficult to find. You wouldn't be able to remove them all in that way. So you might have to do some finagling to make that work appropriately if you're trying to only take out some. But removing all, since in my case it made sense, I wanted to replace all, that worked great. So anyway, hope this is helpful for somebody. I thought it was actually a pretty cool process. So feel free to hit me up in the comments or on the Reddit thread, where I'll probably post this afterwards as well. Anyway, thanks for watching.